controller had sent Edward to the works to be mended. Near the works station, Edward noticed a narrow-gauge engine standing in an open-sided shed. "That's Skarloey," he thought. "What's he doing there?" He remembered Skarloey and his brother Renius, because in the old days he had often brought passengers who wanted to travel up to the lake in their little train. As the men at the works could not mend him at once, Edward asked them to put him on a siding close to Skarloey. Skarloey was pleased to see Edward. "The owner has just bought 2 more engines," he said. "He told me I was a very old engine and deserved a good rest. He gave me this shed so that I could see everything and not be lonely." "But I am lonely all the same," he continued sadly. "I miss Renius very much. Yesterday one of the new engines pushed him on a truck, and now he's gone to be mended. I wish I could be mended too, and pull coaches again." "Have your coaches got names?" asked Edward. "Oh, yes. There's Agnes, Ruth, Jemima, Lucy and Beatrice. Agnes is proud. She has cushions for first-class passengers. She pities Ruth, Jemima and Lucy, who are third class with bare boards. But they all 4 sniff at Beatrice. Beatrice often smells of fish and cheese, but she is most important," said Skarloey earnestly. "She has a little window through which the guard sells tickets. I sometimes leave the others behind, but I always take Beatrice. You must have tickets, and a guard, you know." "Of course," said Edward gravely. "Renius and I," continued Skarloey, "used to take turns at pulling the trains. We know everybody and everybody knows us. We whistle to the people in the fields, level crossings, and in lonely cottages and farms, and the people always wave to us. We love passing the school playgrounds at break time, and then the children will always run over to the fence to watch us go by. The passengers always wave, because they think the children are waving to them. But we engines know better, of course," said Skarloey importantly. "Yes, we do indeed," agreed Edward. "We take your tourists to the lake, and then get ready to pull the train back." "We enjoy the morning journey home, because then our friends from the villages come down to do their shopping. We whistle before every station, 'Peep, peep, look out!' and the people are there ready. 'Where's Mrs. Last?' asks the guard. 'She's coming!' 'Peep, peep,' we whistle, and Mrs. Last comes running onto the platform. 'We'll leave you behind one of these days, Mrs.,' laughs our driver, but we know he never will. We stop elsewhere too, at farm crossings and stiles, where paths lead to lonely houses. Renius and I know all the places very well indeed, and our driver used to say that we would stop even if he didn't put on the brakes. Sometimes on market day, Ruth, Jemima and Lucy were so full of people that the guard would allow third-class passengers to travel in Agnes. She didn't like that at all, and would grumble, 'First-class coach, third-class people.' That made me cross. 'Shut up,' I'd say, 'or I'll bump you.' That soon stopped her rudeness to my friends." Just then, some workmen came. "We're going to mend you now, Edward," they said. "Come along." "Well, goodbye, Skarloey. Thank you for telling me about your railway. It's a lovely little line." "It is, it is. Thank you for talking to me, Edward. You've cheered me up." Goodbye. Skarloey watched Edward being taken back to the works. Then, shutting his eyes, he dozed in the warm afternoon sun. He smiled as he dozed, for he was dreaming, as old engines will, of happy days in the past.
The bluebells are coming, oh ho, ho ho, the bluebells are coming, oh ho. If you must sing, Percy, grumbled Douglas. Can't you sing in tune? Anyway, our song's about Campbells, and mine's about bluebells. And it's daft. Bluebells are flowers. Flowers can't come, they grow. My song isn't daft. Percy was indignant. It is, then. I ken fine about bluebells. We've a song called the Bluebells of Scotland. But, said Percy triumphantly, the Bluebells of England are different. They're engines, and one of them's coming with his controller. Didn't you listen, he went on severely, to the fat controller telling us all about it? I was away. Oh dear. I couldn't understand it all. But engines on the other railway aren't safe now. Their controllers are cruel. They don't like engines anymore. They put them on cold, damp sidings. And then... They cut them up. You're right there, agreed Douglas. If I hadn't escaped, I'd have been cut up too. It's all because of yon diesels. They're all devils, he added fiercely. Fair play, Douglas, reminded Percy. Some are nice. Look at Rusty and Daisy. Maybe so, answered Douglas. But I'd never trust one myself. But what I cannot understand is all your blether about bluebells. Well, the bluebells are kind people who want to save engines. They've made a place in England called the Bluebell Railway. Engines can escape there and be safe. Like me winning away here. Yes, Percy went on, just like that. If they're old or ill, a fitter makes them well. They can have their own special colours, all the coal and water they need, and pull trains too. That's braw hearing, said Douglas with feeling. The fat controller says Stepney was the first engine to escape there, so he's asked him to visit us and bring his controller. But, objected Douglas, how about yon diesels? Mightn't they catch him on the way? We thought so too, said Percy. But the fat controller says there's no danger of that. Stepney's a match for any diesel. Besides, his controller will take care of him. He's a brave engine for all that, said Douglas admiringly. Fancy fighting his way through all those diesels just to see us. look, squeaked Percy. The station's crowded. Silly, how can I look? Unless I be a corkscrew. Why have they all come? There's no train. But Percy was wrong. The signal dropped, and from far away an engine whistled. A gleam of yellow shone through the bridge girders. Here he comes, yelled Douglas. The two engines whistled excitedly in welcome. As with passengers and people waving and cheering, he puffed proudly through the junction on the last stage of his long journey.
Thomas and Edward gave a splendid effort building the railway, but they weren't suited for fast mainline services. As such, the fat director purchased another engine called Henry. Although a good sort, he was prone to steaming troubles, which caused endless frustration. Due to a lack of funds, engines were loaned from other railways. One of these, known only as 87546, fancied himself the savior of the line and never failed to make it known. "Fret no longer," he declared, dragging Henry and his train into the big station, "for I have restored order to our timetable once more." "Does he ever tire of all that hot air in his boiler?" Thomas remarked to Edward. "I say, you, little one," the big engine beckoned to Thomas. "Be a good lackey, take my coaches and the indisposed away. I must rest my aching wheels." Evidently not, murmured Edward. As Thomas buffered up, Henry couldn't even meet his gaze. "Oh, I'm sorry," he sighed. "He should be sorry," retorted Thomas. "One day, he'll get his." That night, Thomas retired to the shed. A vulgar discourse greeted him. "You know," 87546 said loudly to another loaned engine, "I do sympathize with the fat director. Wasted what little hard-earned money he had on a mite, an antique, and an invalid." He looked across to Henry, sleeping as workmen tried to mend him. "I'm the real bargain. The strength of 3 for the coal and water consumption of 1. Only a matter of time before he purchases me." "The fat director," Edward interjected, "favors engines with good character. You leave much to be desired in that department." "And where has good character led you, Certainly not the main line. Speed and strength are all that matters there. When I pull coaches, you merely see a streak of blue. Engines like you fade into the background. I'd like to see you do my work without falling to pieces. He turned back to the other engine. Now, a more pressing matter. When I am purchased, what do you suppose my proper name should be? I fancy something regal. Lord Frederick Regaby has a certain charm to it, no? Thomas was about to retort, but Edward gave him a look. Save your steam, he muttered. It's no use arguing with him. They stared at the loaned engine with contempt. Henry, who'd only been pretending to sleep, had heard everything. The next morning, 87546 awoke to a startling sight. There was Henry, hissing and wheezing. What the devil is this? Oh dear! Henry coughed feebly. Thought the men had made me better. Well, get better and out of my way this instant. My admiring passengers are waiting. I demand extrication at once. But the other engines had all left for work. Worse and worse, the fat director scowled as he paced the platform. The passengers cannot be kept waiting. I'm sorry, Edward. As the others have gone, you'll have to take the coaches. Edward gulped, staring at the long train. Begging your pardon, sir, but this is a bit beyond my capabilities. Not if I helped you, bubbled Thomas, shuffling alongside. 2 engines are better than 1, sir. Besides, the others can manage their own shunting for a while. The fat director considered. Very well, he said at last. Off you go. Do your best, but take care. The engines backed excitedly onto the train. The passengers marveled at the strange combination, but were thankful to have any train at all. Finally, the guard's whistle blew. Come on, called Thomas. Steady now, advised Edward. Soon they were on the main line and having a wonderful time. Thomas was so excited to leave the yards, he nearly pulled Edward's coupling off. Edward chuckled. He was glad to stretch his wheels again. The 2 engines worked so well, the coaches felt light as air. Other engines were shocked as they raced past, whistling with glee. Later, they returned to the big station, exhausted but triumphant. Henry and 87546 stood at the platform. Well, smiled Henry. Our streak of blue has returned, and in one piece, no less. 87546 scowled as the happy passengers swarmed out of the coaches. What splendid little engines you are! Your director must be proud of you. He's very happy with his purchases indeed, chuckled Thomas. No, ha, fumed 87546. You were only allowed out of the yard because clanky old Edward couldn't manage alone. Enjoy your brief moment in the limelight. It's already fading. If I didn't know any better, smirked Thomas, I'd say he didn't like shunting his own train. He chortled off to the water column. But Edward stayed behind. Are you all right, Henry? What on earth happened this morning? Oh, the usual steaming troubles. You know how it is. Miraculously, the problem seemed to vanish after you'd gone. Oh, you didn't, Edward gasped. Now, Edward, Henry grinned, do you really think I'd do such a thing? And without another word, Henry steamed away.
More and more people travelled on the Fat Controller's Railway. More and more ships came to the harbours. Everyone had to work very hard indeed. The trucks complained bitterly, but then trucks always do, when no one takes much notice. The coaches complained too. No sooner had they arrived with one train than they had to go out again with fresh passengers as another. We don't know whether we're coming or going, they protested. We feel quite distracted. No one can say, grumbled Henry, that we're afraid of hard work, but we draw the line at goods trains, finished Gordon. Dirty trucks, dirty sidings, ugh, put in James. What are you boiler-aching about? Asked Duff. I remember on the Great Western, that tin pot railway. Tin pot indeed. Let me tell you. Silence, ordered a well-known voice. Let me tell you that an engine for goods work will arrive from Scotland tomorrow. The news was received with acclamation. The Fat Controller stared. Did you say 2 engines, Inspector? Yes, sir. Then send the other back at once. Certainly, sir. But which? The Fat Controller stared again. Engines have numbers, Inspector, he explained patiently. We bought number 57646. Send the other one back. Quite so, sir. But there is a difficulty. What do you mean? The 2 engines are exactly alike, sir, and have no numbers. They say they lost them on the way. We'll soon settle that nonsense, he said grimly. The 2 engines greeted him cheerfully. I hear you've lost your numbers, he said. How did that happen? The mourner slyly slip it off, sir. You ken how it is. The engines spoke in chorus. I know. Accidentally, on purpose. The twins looked pained. Sir, you wouldn't be thinking we lost them on purpose. I'm not so sure, said the Fat Controller. Now then, which of you is 57646? Oh, that's, is just what we canna mind. The Fat Controller looked at their solemn faces. He turned away. He seemed to have difficulty with his own. He swung round again. What are your names? Donald and Dougie, sir. Good, he said. Then your controller can tell me which of you is which. Oh, he'll get no muckle help for him, sir. Why? He didn't ken our names, sir. How could he? We only given ourselves names when we lost our numbers. One of you, said the Fat Controller. "He's playing truant. I shall find him out and send him home. Inspector," he ordered, "give these engines numbers and set them to work." He walked sternly away. Soon workmen came to give the twins their numbers. Donald was 9 and Douglas 10. When the men went away, they were left alone in the shed. "You may have noticed, Dougie, that yon painters forgot something." "What did they forget?" "They painted braw new numbers on our tenders, but they put none on us." "You mean," grinned Douglas, "that we can—" "Just that," chuckled Donald. "Who'd you wished? Here's the inspector." "No 9 and 10, smiled the inspector. "Here's Duck. He'll show you round before you start work." The twins enjoyed themselves and were soon friends with Duck. They didn't mind what they did. They tackled goods trains and coaches easily. For once the twins had shunted them, trucks knew better than to try any tricks. "We like it fine here," said Donald. "That's good," smiled Duck. "But take my tip. Watch out for Gordon, Henry and James. They're sure to try some nonsense." "Get a fuss yourself," chuckled Douglas. "We'll soon settle them." Donald and Douglas had deep-toned whistles. "They sound like buses," said Gordon. "Or ships," sniggered Henry. "Tugboat Annie," laughed Gordon. "Ha, ha, ha." "You wouldn't be making fun of us, would you now?" asked Donald. Gordon and Henry jumped. They glanced nervously from side to side. "No," said Gordon. No, certainly not," said Henry. "That's fine," said Douglas. "Now just mind the both of you, and keep it that way." That was the way Gordon and Henry kept it. Every day, punctually at 3:30, Gordon steams in with the express. It is called the Wild Nor'Wester, and is full of people from England, Wales and Scotland. There is also a special coach for passengers travelling to places on Thomas's branch line. When the other coaches are taken away empty, engines have to remember to shunt the special coach to the bay platform. It doesn't wait there long. Thomas, with Annie and Clarabelle, comes hurrying from the junction to fetch it. Thomas is very proud of his special coach. One afternoon, Douglas helped Duck in the yard, while Donald waited to take a goods train to the other end of the line. As Duck was busy arranging Donald's trucks, Douglas offered to take away Gordon's coaches. Douglas was enjoying himself when an awful thought struck him. "I hope the Fat Controller doesn't find out I shouldn't be here. I couldn't abide going back." He worried so much over this that he forgot about Thomas's special coach. He pushed it with the others into the carriage siding, then ambled along to join Donald at the water column. As he went, Thomas scampered by, whistling cheerfully. Soon Thomas came fussing. "Where's my coach?" "Coach?" asked Donald. "What coach?" "My special coach that Gordon brings for me. It's gone. I must find it." He bustled away. "Lost sake," said Douglas. "I'm on a stowed the special coach with the others." "You see that?" exclaimed Donald's driver. A mob of angry passengers erupted from the siding. "They're complaining to the fat controller. He'll be coming here next." "Now listen," said Douglas's driver. "We'll change tenders. Then I'll wire with ye, Donald, and take yon goods. Dinna fash about us. Quick now, do as I say." The fat controller and 3 passengers walked towards them. But Donald, with Douglas's tender, number 10, was out and away with the goods before they came near. Douglas and his driver waited with innocent expressions. "Ah," said the fat controller, "number 9. And why have you not taken the goods?" "My tender is awa, sir." The driver showed him the tender, still uncoupled. "I see. Some defect, no doubt. Tell me, why did number 10 leave so quickly?" "Maybe, sir," put in Douglas, "he saw you coming and thought he was late." Said the fat controller. He turned to the passengers. "Here, gentlemen, are the facts. Number 10 has been shunting the yard. Your coach disappeared. We investigate. Number 10, disappears too. You can draw your conclusions. Please accept my apologies. The matter will be investigated. Good afternoon, gentlemen." The fat controller watched them till they climbed the station ramp. His shoulders twitched. He wiped his eyes. Douglas wondered if he was crying. He wasn't. He swung round suddenly. "Douglas," he rapped, "why are you masquerading with Donald's tender?"
Thomas stood at Farquhar, the top station of his branch line. He had run round Annie and Clarabel after the morning journey and was enjoying a short rest before the run back down the valley. His driver and fireman stood beside his cab talking to the guard who'd brought startling news. "Did you know that the station master was burgled last night?" he was asking. Thomas's driver shook his head. "You don't say," he exclaimed. "I didn't know he had anything worth stealing." "He's won cups for gardening," exclaimed the fireman. "All taken, and then the scoundrels had the cheek to pinch his car to carry them away in." "Not that new one he's so proud of," said the driver. The guard nodded, and at that moment the signal rose to show that the line was clear. The driver and fireman climbed into Thomas's cab. The guard blew his whistle, waved his green flag, and got into Clarabel, and Thomas set off. By the time they were through the tunnel, the train was running nicely. Road and railway were beside each other here. Thomas remembered his race with Bertie the bus. He'd only won because he could go through the hill, while Bertie had to go over it. A flash of colour on the road ahead caught his eye. He tried to go faster to look more closely. "Steady, Thomas," said his driver. "There's plenty of time." "Can't we get closer to that car?" panted Thomas. "It looked like station masters to me." "Lots of cars look like that," laughed the driver, but he opened the regulator and they began to draw level. There were 2 men in the car. They waved when they saw Thomas and tried to go faster. "That's the car all right, Thomas," said the fireman, "and those 2 must be the thieves. But we can't stop them, and they'll be gone long before the next station." "We need pencil, paper, and something to put a note in," said the driver. "We'll throw a message out at the next signal box." Quickly, he wrote the note, and they put it in the fireman's empty lunch tin. Then, drawing ahead of the car, Thomas whistled to attract the signalman's attention. They slowed so that the fireman could throw the box up to him, and as they went past, both driver and fireman shouted, "Police!" at the top of their voices. By now, the stolen car had gone well ahead, and Thomas did not see it again. but the signalman telephoned police headquarters at once, and the thieves were stopped at a roadblock about 10 miles further on. That afternoon, the Fat Controller travelled in Annie to Farquhar. When he got there, he and the station master climbed onto a porter's trolley. They told the passengers the whole story, and the station master thanked Thomas, his driver, and his fireman for their prompt action. The passengers cheered loudly, and they cheered even more when they heard that the station master's gardening cups had all been found undamaged in a sack in the boot of the car. "A long time ago," said the Fat Controller, "Thomas showed how valuable he is to the smooth running of my railway. I am sure you will all agree that today he has once again proved himself to be a really useful engine."
The men had been working on the new engine for a long time. "What's his name?" the other engines kept asking. "We don't know, it's a secret," was always the reply. "Everyone just calls him Number 7. At last, Peter Sam could contain himself no longer. He asked the Fin Controller, "Wouldn't you like to know?" "I do."
What is it?
Came a chorus of voices. "But I'm not telling. You'll have to wait until the naming party." Ivo Hugh, the railway's chief engineer, was going to be doing the naming. Even he didn't know the engine's name.
But Mr. Hugh, you must know what it is,
protested Skarloey. "I'm afraid not," laughed Mr. Hugh. "The name won't be painted until the last minute."
It must be a place or a person, said Sir Handel, to match us.
"I think it's a place," decided Renius. "But why is it a secret?" The other engines didn't know, but they thought Renius's idea was the best. On the great day, a special train was to pick up the Fin Controller, his guests, and Mr. Hugh, and bring them to the sheds for the ceremony. Skarloey, as the oldest engine, was going to pull it. Nancy came early to the sheds. First they cleaned Skarloey, then they polished Peter Sam. Skarloey whistled cheerfully as he went up the line. By then, all the other engines looked just as smart as he did. Skarloey passed the big house where the Fin Controller lived and went as far as the middle station. There, he ran around the train and pulled it back downhill. He stopped at the big house, and when the Fin Controller and his guests were on the train, he stopped near the cottage where Mr. Hugh lived. Skarloey had just restarted when, with a squealing noise, something dashed by his front wheels. He stopped quickly. "What on earth?" demanded the fireman, hopping out of the cab. In the long grass beside the line laid a large mother pig, and frisking around with her a crowd of small piglets. Skarloey couldn't go any further until they were caught. But the pigs didn't want to be caught. Oh dear, Skarloey sighed. We're going to be late for the party now. I know it. The Fin controller, Mr. Hugh, and even some of the guests had joined the chase until all the animals had been captured and carefully put back into their field. At the sheds, a large crowd had gathered around the engines. Number 7, with his name hidden by a curtain, simmered quietly. The minutes kept ticking. Renius was getting anxious. Something must be wrong, he whispered to Duke. Skarloey should be here by now. Perhaps the Fin controller wasn't ready, Duncan grunted, but he was firmly hushed by the others. At last, they heard a whistle in the distance. A little later, Skarloey puffed thankfully to a halt next to the new engine. I'm very sorry we're late, laughed Mr. Hugh. We've been chasing pigs. And he told them all about what happened. Now then, he went on, I'm here to name an engine. I don't know what he's called, so your guess will be as good as mine. Without further ado, I name this engine... He pulled back the curtain. Bless my soul, no, not that. It's Ivo Hugh. He turned to the Fin controller. I'm honored, sir. Thank you so much. The Fin controller laughed happily as the crowd cheered out in excitement. All the little engines whistled together in acclamation.
I'm not happy, complained Gordon. Your firebox is out of order, said James. No wonder, after all that coal you had yesterday. Hard work brings good appetite, snapped Gordon. You wouldn't understand. I know, put in Duck brightly. It's boiler ache. I warned you about that standpipe on the other railway, but you drank gallons. It's not boiler ache, protested Gordon. Of course it is, said Henry. That water's bad. It furs up your tubes. Your boiler must be full of sludge. Have a good wash out. Then you'll feel a different engine. Don't be vulgar, said Gordon huffily. Gordon backed down on his train, hissing mournfully. Cheer up, Gordon, said the Fat Controller. I can't, sir. The others say I've got boiler ache, but I haven't, sir. I keep thinking about the dreadful state of the world, sir. Is it true, sir, what the diesels say? What do they say? They boast that they've abolished steam, sir. Yes, Gordon, it is true. What, sir? All my Doncaster brothers drawn the same time as me? All gone, except one. The guard's whistle blew, and Gordon puffed sadly away. Poor old Gordon, said the Fat Controller. If only we could. Yes, I'll ask his owner at once. Arrangements took time, but one evening Gordon's driver ran back excited. Wake up, Gordon! The Fat Controller's given you a surprise. Look! Gordon could hardly believe it. Backing towards him were two massive green tenders, and their engine shape was very like his own. It's Flying Scotsman, he gasped. The Fat Controller's brought him to see me. Oh, thank you, sir. Gordon's toot of joy was drowned by Flying Scotsman's as he drew happily alongside. Next day, the two engines were photographed side by side. You've changed a lot, smiled Flying Scotsman. I had a rebuild at Crewe. They didn't do a proper Doncaster job, of course, but it serves. I had a rebuild too and looked hideous, but my owner said I was an extra special engine and made them give me back my proper shape. Is that why you have two tenders, being special? No, you'd hardly believe it, Gordon, but over there, there's hardly any coal and water. But surely, every proper railway... Exactly. You are lucky, Gordon, to have a controller who knows how to run railways. Everyone got on well with Flying Scotsman, except Henry. Henry was jealous. Tenders are marks of distinction, he complained. Everybody knows that. Why has he got two? He's famous, explained Duck and Donald. He was the second to go 100 miles an hour. Besides, the other railway has no coal and water. Oh, sniffed Henry. I can't believe that. I never boast, he continued, but I always work hard enough for two. I deserve another tender for that. Duck whispered something to Donald. Henry, asked Duck innocently, would you like my tenders? Yours? Exclaimed Henry. What have you got to do with tenders? All right, said Duck. The deal's off. Would you like 'em, Donald? I wouldn't deprive you of the honour. It is a great honour, said Duck thoughtfully. But I'm only a tank engine, so I don't really understand tenders. Perhaps James might... I'm sorry I was rude, said Henry hastily. How many tenders have you, and when could I have them? 6. You can have them this evening. 6 lovely tenders, chortled Henry. What a splendid sight I'll be. That will show the others the sort of engine I am. Henry was excited. Do you think it'll be all right? He asked for the umpteenth time. Of course, said Duck. Just go where I told you, and they'll be ready. Meanwhile, word had gone round, and the others waited where they could get a good view. Henry was cheered to the echo when he came, but he wasn't a splendid sight. He had 6 tenders, true, but they were very old and very dirty. All were filled with boiler sludge. Had a good wash out, Henry? Called a voice. That's right. You feel a different engine now. Henry wasn't sure, but he thought the voice was Gordon's.
Early one morning, Renius brought some trucks to the slate mines. To his surprise, Duncan sat solemnly in the shed. What's the matter? He asked.
Ghost on the bridge?
Renius went wide-eyed. You saw it? He saw nothing, chuckled his driver. We told you 12 times now, Duncan, it was only us. Such things shouldn't be used for jokes, scolded Renius. Don't be ridiculous, said Duncan's driver. Rusty's story isn't true. It's all too true, frowned Renius. And I should know. I saw it. With my own 2 eyes.
Who is it?
Renius composed himself. It was before you came here, when things were bad. Skarloey and I worked tirelessly, but it proved too much for him. He sat in the shed awaiting repairs, and I did the lion's share of the work. I didn't fault him for it, of course, but the strain was starting to show. One night, trouble with the winch delayed my departure from the mines. I was exhausted and eager for the comfort of my shed. Darkness had fallen, and the light of the moon spilled over the hills. As I neared the old iron bridge, I heard the sound of another engine. Who could... I began, before catching sight of an engine puffing towards the bridge. It looked like Skarloey. What on earth is he doing out here, I wondered. Try as I might, I couldn't catch up, and lost the mysterious figure in the mist. When I returned to the shed, I was very cross. If you can't work during the day, I scowled, you certainly can't go gallivanting off at night. I beg your pardon, Skarloey yawned. You know better than to fool around by the bridge, especially when others are still out working. You do need a rest, he grunted. You're seeing things. We went grumpily to sleep and didn't say a word to each other the next morning. I had too much work to bother with his nonsense. I was late leaving the mines again. It was a misty evening and we had to take care. As I puffed slowly along, I peered through the mist, keeping a watchful eye for Skarloey. I had just reached the bridge when a shrieking whistle echoed around the hills. I was surprised, and so was my driver. What was that? He shivered. That wasn't Skarloey's whistle, I said, growing more nervous by the minute. I peered across the bridge, where the mist danced frantically. And there it was. It looked strikingly similar to Skarloey, but painted all in black. Its face was pale white, and its harsh gaze pierced right through me. Slowly, menacingly, it started moving across the bridge towards me. Driver tried to move us back, but I couldn't. I was frozen in fear. The engine's pulse echoed through and around the gorge. As it drew near, there was a bump. I watched in horror as the engine tipped and plunged off the side of the bridge. In my shock, I looked down at the rails. There was a crack at the spot where the engine came off. "We must get help," I cried. We raced back to the mine and quickly told the foreman what had happened. "So," he chuckled, "it still roams under the light of the moon, eh? That's how the legend goes, anyway." "Don't be silly, Renius. There's only 2 engines on this line and you're one of them. You can spend the night here. We'll mend the rail in the morning." "That engine saved me in the end," Renius finished. "If I'd ventured across the bridge, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. My crew and I put it down to exhaustion, despite knowing what we saw. Skarloey heard the whistle too, and was relieved when I arrived home safe. We made up at once, and we've taken great care on that bridge ever since." "So," shuddered Duncan, "Rusty's ghost is..." In the distance, the echoes of a whistle filled the air. "All too real," finished Renius.
The two diesels surveyed the shed. "It's time, 7101, said one, that we took this railway over." "Shush, 199. It's their railway after all." "Not for long," persisted 199. "Our controller says steam engines spoil our image." "Of course we do," snapped Duck. "We show what frauds you are. Call yourselves engines? If anything happens, you care nothing for your train. You just moan for a fitter. We bring it home, if only on one cylinder." "Nothing," boasted 199, "ever happens to us. We are reliable." Vulgar noises greeted this. "How rude," said 199. "You asked for it," growled 7101. "Now shut up." Next day, Henry was rolling home tender first. "I'm a failed engine," he mourned. "Lost my regulator. Driver says it jammed wide open, and he can't mend it till I'm cool. However," he went on, "I've got steam, and driver can use my reverser. But it would happen after Duck fooled me with those tenders. Now they'll laugh at me again." He reached a signal box and stopped, whistling for a road. Opposite the box, on the up line, stood Diesel 199 with a train of oil tankers. Worse and worse, thought Henry. Now old Reliable will laugh at me too. The signalman came out. "For pity's sake, take this spam can away. It's failed. The Limited is behind, and all he does is wail for his fitter." "Spam can?" fumed 199. "Stow it," snapped the signalman, "or I'll take my tin opener to you. Now then." 199 subsided at this dreadful threat, and Henry pulled the train out of the way. The diesel didn't help. He just sulked. The Limited rushed by with a growl and a roar. Henry gave a chuckle. "Look, spam can," he said. "There's your little pal." The diesel said nothing. He hoped 7101 hadn't noticed. "7101 hadn't noticed. He had troubles of his own. He was cross with his coaches. They seemed to be getting heavier. He roared at them, but it did no good. Engines have a pump called an ejector, which draws air out of the train's brake pipes to keep the brakes off. If it fails, air leaks in and the brakes come on, gently at first, then harder and harder. 7101's ejector had failed. The brakes were already leaking on while he passed Henry. He struggled on for half a mile before being brought to a stand, growling furiously, unable to move a wheel. "Well, well, well. Did you hear what signalman said? I thought they'd be laughing at me," chuckled Henry. "Now the joke's on them." "Moving two dead diesels and their trains," said his driver thoughtfully. "That's no joke for a failed engine." "Do you think you can do it?" "I'll have a good try," said Henry with spirit. "Anyway, 7101's better than old Spam Can. He did try and shut him up last night." "Come on then," said his driver. "We mustn't keep the passengers waiting." "Get moving, you!" Henry puffed the sulky diesel into motion and started to the rescue. Henry gently buffered up to the express. While the two drivers talked, his fireman joined his front brake pipe to the coaches. "It's better than we thought, Henry," said his driver. "The diesel can pull if we keep the brakes off. So the only weight we'll have is Spancan's goods." "Oh," said Henry. "That's a mercy." He was, by now, feeling rather puffed. "Are you ready?" "Yes, I am." So with 7101 growling in front, and Henry gamely puffing in the middle, the long cavalcade set out for the next big station. Donald and Flying Scotsman were waiting. They cheered as Henry puffed past. He braked the coaches thankfully. Spancan and the tankers trailed far behind. The passengers buzzed out like angry bees, but the Fat Controller told them about Henry, so they forgot to be cross and thanked Henry instead. They called him an enterprising engine and took his photograph. They were thrilled, too, when Flying Scotsman backed down on their train. If the guard hadn't tactfully shooed them to their coaches, the train would have started later than ever. Donald took the goods. "Return 199 to the other railway," ordered the Fat Controller. "I will write my views later." Henry and 7101 went away together. "I'm sorry about last night," ventured the Diesel. "That's all right. You did shut old Reliable up." "And," said the Diesel ruefully, "made a fool of myself today, too." "Rubbish. A failed ejector might happen to anyone. I'd lost my regulator." "You? Failed?" exclaimed the Diesel. "And yet—" His voice trailed away in admiration. "Well," said Henry, "emergency, you know. Trains must get through." 7101 said no more. He had a lot to think about.